Okay. You'll have to stay tuned to see if this is edited in or out.
Oh, dang it.
This is why I record ahead of time.
That's smart. Yeah. Live is risky.
It is. Welcome to Vintage SF. I'm Richard Rempel, and today I'm joined by Jake of Pulp Mortem. Welcome, Jake.
Hello. Welcome. Thanks for having me, Richard.
Oh, you're
I
welcome.
feel,
It's been a long
I,
time coming. I've really enjoyed
I,
your channel. And as you
oh,
can
thank
see on
you.
that wall behind him there, Pulp Mortem literally is about pulp books. And
Yeah.
you're not a mortician, are you?
Not yet. I mean, I'm open to it. I mean, never, I mean, don't knock it till you try it, is what I always say.
All right. Well, for the books you are.
Yes.
So we're here today to talk about Null A by A.E. Van Vogt. But before we get started with that, I love that cover, by the way. That's a
Fun
great
in the
cover.
64
Yeah.
A's.
I think the people who are watching this telecast would love to hear your SF origin story. How did you come to read and perhaps engage in science fiction in different ways?
Or just come to. Did you freeze on me? Did I
I saw a
freeze?
phrase here too. Let's try that again. I'll ask the question again. Are we good right now?
But don't edit it. Leave it in. Don't edit it. Leave it in.
So, Jake, I'm very interested in hearing about your SF origin story. How did you come to enjoy science fiction?
Well, my fiction into science fiction was well, growing up. My favorite movie was Star Wars. Like that was my favorite show was Star Trek. So I was always in the sci-fi, into science fiction. That's kind of what I gravitated towards. And by the time I was 14 years old, 14 or 15, I really got into the Star Trek or starting with Star Wars, kind of the expanded universe novels, starting with Timothy Zahn's Heir to the Empire series, which are legitimately great.
I agree.
And I went through Star Trek as well, in particular the Next Generation novelizations. And at one point, I don't know how many I had of you. I had all the at one point I had every Star Wars novelization and nearly every Star Trek, even the ones written by William Shatner, which are hard to read and absolutely hilarious. And that was kind of it for years. And then I ended up giving them away. And then I've always liked science fiction. It's been kind of my favorite genre, but I didn't read any of it. I hardly read any of it until I would say a few years ago. I started to get back into it as I was, and about 2 years ago, I quit my job, semi-retired now, and I was writing full time. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to write, get my great science fiction novel out there. Um, but you can only write so long during the day. There's only so many hours I can sit on my computer and write before I'm like, oh, I got to go do something. I'm losing my mind. And I didn't want to go get a part-time job and do something. I wanted to do something more fun and interesting. And I was at an antique shop with my kids just goofing around one day, and I saw it was actually an old Pyramid Stripe book, an old Alan E. Norris, and I picked it up and I'm like, I had the thought. I said, I wonder if anyone's ever talked about this. I wonder if anybody's ever reviewed this because it looks so obscure and so odd. And I still don't know if anybody ever has reviewed that particular book. And from there, bought a camera, bought a microphone, and reviewing. Started reviewing this old book on YouTube. I had no idea you existed. I had no idea BookTube existed. I thought I was the only person doing this, which is hilarious and super naive. And almost instantly I got Ira from SF Words of Wonder was like, "Hey, this channel looks great. Keep it up, kid." And I'm like, "Whoa, there's somebody else doing this." And then you were pretty soon thereafter, around the same time as well. You were commenting on my stuff, and John from Sci-Fi Scavenger gave me a shout out. And all of a sudden, it just kind of opened my eyes, like, "Oh my gosh, like there's a whole community of people that love these old vintage books." And I didn't love these old vintage. I liked science fiction. I loved old sci-fi, but I was coming into it very much as a novice. And I mean, even for my very first video, I'm just like, I'm not an expert in this. I'm kind of discovering these things with childlike wonder. And so what I know now, as opposed to what I knew a year ago, I had no, like, I thought I was, but the very first book I reviewed was Andre Norton. I was like, I wonder if anybody's ever heard of Andre Norton. It's like, well, anybody who's gone into a thrift shop has heard of Andre Norton. And so very naive. But yeah, as I started going into it and getting involved in it, the community has blown me away. Just the amount of people who are interested in and now I'm at the point where like I love these old books now. Like I can't wait to finish a book. I'm going through my script, writing it, filming it, getting so antsy to the point that I'm like, I just can't wait to start reading the next one, which is crazy because I did this to supplement some of my time while I was writing, and now I got to like be very intentional with my writing. Like, okay, I
Mm.
haven't written in like 3 days. I have to write. I've just been filming videos and reading books, and I don't know. So it's funny seeing this thing that was supposed to be kind of a side hobby to fill a couple hours a day is now becoming the main thing I do, which is unexpected and a total blast.
And if you haven't seen his channel, definitely go over there. He has a unique way of looking at these books. What I
That's
love
a good way of putting it.
What I love really is the way you bring across your humor, but you do it in a way that you edit a lot of clips in. You want to talk about how you create your videos or describe your videos?
Well, yes. I do add there's a lot of my kind of ridiculous humor and kind of absurdist as well, but I do add a lot of clips and a lot of gifs and a lot of like, I try to keep it. My goal was I don't have anybody in my life who likes old books. None of my friends and family, some of them read, maybe half of them read, but they'll read like a book a year. And it's not science fiction and it's not old science fiction. And so I was literally the only person I knew that read this stuff, that talks about this stuff. And what I wanted to do is make a video that not just somebody who's a fan of science fiction would enjoy to watch, or a fan of these books, but somebody that anybody could watch and be like, I may not be into this style of book. I may not be into I may never pick this book up, but it's a fun video to watch. It's entertaining to watch. And I actually do have a lot of friends that have said that, like, I don't read this stuff, but I mean, I even had one friend who's like, I don't read at all, but I kind of picked up a copy of that book when I saw it at the bookstore. And so I'm like, yes, that's a victory right there.
Nice.
And so, yeah,
Nice.
I definitely try to infuse make it more fun. Um, because I could sit and listen to somebody just talk and ramble about a certain book. And and I think that's probably 80% of booktube is people just turning on their camera on their webcam being like, is this thing on? Okay. And then they'll forget to turn it off or they can wander around. And it's rough. I can watch that all day. I think it's great. But I wanted something that could also have a broader appeal, I guess.
Yeah. There's an entertainment value to your videos that I don't see very often in other videos, at least in the booktube type community.
It's a lot of bloody work too.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
why I
that's
do
what I'm
one
very
video a
impressed.
week.
That's what I'm very impressed by is the editing that goes into it and obviously the thought that's gone into the writing of the way you sometimes take down a novel or you're talking about the cover and things that look hilarious on a cover. It's just a lot of fun.
I'm good. Yeah, that's what I'm going for. Books should be fun.
Exactly.
Once I started doing this, there was a science fiction author that I had read in addition to like all the Star Wars and Star Trek and all that stuff, and that was H.P. Lovecraft. And I was inspired by H.P. Lovecraft in the sense that he was underappreciated,
Hmm.
and especially in his time. And he had immediately there was a grouping of people of the H.P. Lovecraft Society, his friends, C.L. Moore and Clark Ashton Smith, and a few others who were like, this guy's something special. He's amazing. But I mean, he died. When did he die? In like the 40s,
I haven't,
something like that.
yeah, I don't know.
And for decades, he was forgotten. And he was a mainstay in like the Weird Tales and all those pulp magazines. But then he was just kind of was forgotten and kept alive. And then around the 70s, the H.P. Lovecraft Society was like bringing his stuff, reprinting his stuff, and just by word of mouth, essentially, was able to bring his works back out into the open. And now there's no cosmic horror without H.P. Lovecraft. You know what I mean? There's
Hmm.
no Stephen King without H.P. Lovecraft. There's no Dean Koontz. All these authors are just, he's inspired so much. And it's because somebody, some people brought this old stuff back out into the light. And so that was kind of inspiration too. That's why I talk a lot about the authors when or before I even get into the book. Before we get to that, we talk about the authors because so many of these authors have just been forgotten in time. They've been neglected. And a lot of that is due, most of that is due is because of just the oversaturation of the pulp magazines. I mean, I think at one point there was close to 200 different magazines just in the States alone. Maybe it's 150, I forget. At one point, and then the paper shortage of World War II completely killed the pulps. But up until that point, it was so easy to get lost because anybody with a typewriter and some crazy ideas could get something accepted.
It is amazing the amount of authors that came out of that period. And what I find very fascinating is the 30s and 40s prior to World War II. All of those were in the magazines. They weren't really in the books. Not too many books were printed from some of these guys. Maybe someone like Edgar Rice Burroughs or something like that might have had a book
Yes.
printed. But all of a sudden, in the 50s and 60s, you were getting some of their stories mashed together. Actually, the person we're
Mm-hmm.
going to talk about, or A.E. Van Vogt, he's a guy who came up with the term fix-up novel, where he takes short stories and mashes them together and tries to have a
Oh.
cohesive uh, story told over the 5 short stories that they threw in together. What's really interesting to me, and I think we'll talk about a little bit today, is how these guys tremendously influenced the new authors that came out in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. We may find their work difficult to read at times or hilarious in some ways, but their ideas,
Some mild foreshadowing there.
yeah, but their ideas really influenced a whole new generation of SF writers.
Yeah. Before we get to that,
Yeah.
what do you know about dreams? Because
Uh,
we've talked before, like we've all, not just in the comments, like you joined. I had a New Year's live stream. You're kind enough to join and hang out with for a while, and that was a lot of fun. I wasn't nervous about. So what I say is I wasn't nervous about this. Like obviously you're very dapper. I kind of feel like I'm in the principal's office a little bit. But like I wasn't nervous to be here, so like I'm not attributing it to that. But last night. I'm having a dream that we're going on our live stream, right? So I go there. I actually drive there. I'm like, I'm going. I'll be right back. I'm going to go stream with Richard, and I arrive at a parking lot, a grocery store parking lot where there's a table set up, right? And there's a bunch of like, it's you, me, and then a group of like, there's like an Asian gal who I've seen on like Food Network before, and like 2 other like kind of like gangster punk, like cool punk kids, whatever. And they're like, "All right, let's ready to go. But before we go," and she passed me a blunt or a joint of marijuana. And I don't smoke. I've never smoked marijuana before, but I was like, well, I guess so when in Rome, I guess. And it was like this. It was huge. It was about this big, and it kind of tapered at the end like this. And so you and I, you and me, were just like smoke passing this giant joint back and forth, smoking. And the whole time I kept being like, what's my mom gonna think? And like, my mom doesn't watch what I do. And then I woke up feeling weird. So I don't know what that means. What do you guys put it in the comments? What do you guys think that means?
I have no clue.
I guess we'll find out.
I guess so. I'm looking forward to reading the comments.
Ah,
Uh, I don't think I dreamed about this, Jake.
what? Well, you will.
Now I might have some nightmares. We'll see.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Let's go to the book. And first off, I had a couple copies of it. I had this one that was fairly early, I think this one's about 1951 or so. It's one of the first paperbacks from an ace double, and it was an ace double of A.E. Van Vogt. The other one's Universe
I love
Maker, which
that.
I haven't read yet. And then I had this one here, and apparently he's updated it. He's known for doing this.
Yes.
He'll he'll take his short stories, he'll update them into a novel, and then he'll update the novel again. And I tried to compare a few things here, and I actually thought that this one made more sense than, than this updated one,
Really?
which was kind of interesting. And it's got a really nice, he's got a nice leisure outfit there with the nice short
That's
shorts
he's
and
ready to play tennis, but he did not
yeah.
shop in the men's section. So, which one did you read out of those two?
I started with this one, and then I went to this one, and I found it
Okay.
better. My advice would be read the one earlier version. And I would think that
Oh,
your version that you have there is the earlier version.
this is the 64. This is the earlier. I know that he updated it. A. Van Vogt updated it in regard because most it sounded like most critics at the time were like, "This is great," except for Damon Knight. Damon Knight shredded this book, and in response to Damon Knight, he updated it. I think in 70. And
Yeah,
at that
that's
point,
right.
Damon Knight was like walked back all of his critique and was like, "Oh, much better."
I I think Damon Knight was just being politically correct there. I I think that Damon Knight's criticisms that we might get into here are actually pretty spot on. And this is a
Yeah.
very young Damon Knight. This was a criticism when the stories were first published in Astounding magazine with John W. Campbell, who loved A.E. Van Vogt. Often people talk about the golden age starting with A.E. Van Vogt's stories in 1939 issue of Astounding. Those stories that they're talking about were collected in The Voyage of the Space Beagles. This is an image from one of those stories. I think it was called The Black Destroyer.
That's cool.
Anyway, a little bit of background there. By the way, A.E. Van Vogt came from my area of the world, from Manitoba. He was born in a small southern town south of Winnipeg and then uh, grew up mostly in southern Manitoba, in Winnipeg, spent a little bit of time in Toronto, then came back to Winnipeg, and then eventually moved to California. So some of these stories here were potentially written in Winnipeg, which is kind of interesting. Actually, I lost my train of thought.
How
I
very
think I was
Winnipeg of you. I don't even know what that means.
I think I was talking about how the stories were put together, and then he would continue to edit them. This isn't something that started with George Lucas and Star Wars. Uh, Definitely, A.E.
Yeah.
Van Vogt was doing some of this type of thing. So we
Yeah.
have the special editions of things.
Oh
But
yeah.
this, oh yeah, this came out in 1945, and that's where I was going with this. Damon Knight, like a month or two after the three stories are printed in the magazines, comes out and just lambastes them.
Yeah.
Really, uh, really takes them to town for a few things. So I think what we need to do is we need to talk about the story first a little bit, and then maybe we should get into what Damon Knight said.
Yeah. Good idea.
You want to take a shot at summarizing this book?
I think so. I think I can. I'll
Okay.
try, and you fill in the gaps wherever
All
I'm
right. I
wherever
will.
I'm missing something, or correct me because it's not all clear.
I agree.
And so, essentially, the story opens up with our hero, Wilbur Gosane. Is it
Go sane.
Gosane? Um, who's going to this there's a game like this is kind of this utopian society, at least they kind of set it up like it is, but then there's like roving gangs or something, so it's like futuristic society 2600 something, and there's this huge machine that controls, basically regulates or controls something called the games. We aren't really told what the games are. I think maybe it's we get some, it could be this, we don't actually see any of the games, but the whole city, the whole world, or the whole wherever is excited about these games. He goes and to apply for the games, and if you win the games, you get a trip to Venus, which Venus is this utopian society. It's very, I think that's the correct word, a utopian society where there's no government, there's no, everybody self-regulates, everybody, there's no police force. It's just super. It's where people who are null A, which maybe I should explain null A.
Hmm.
I don't know if I can explain null A.
Give it a
It's
shot. I'll help you where I can, but I don't understand it either, really.
did A.E. Van Vogt understand it?
I don't know, but maybe L. Ron Hubbard, his friend, did.
Yes, yes. I'm sure we'll get into that as well. He understands a lot. Um, yeah, so basically it's a non-Aristotelian. It's basically common sense, not common sense, but rationality. See, I can't even explain. I wrote it down at some point, and then I help me
I
out.
heard one
Help you.
person say some once that uh, Aristotelian type of person would be like Captain Kirk from Star Trek, and that Null A would be like Spock. Uh, and that's not
Yeah,
exactly right. It's
it's
more
not
that
exactly right.
no, but it's supposed to be a higher level of thinking, a level where you are seeing needs and meeting those needs as a
Yeah.
society. You don't have to be formulated as a government to be able to take care of things in your society. Sort of a higher man in some way.
Rationale, like
Mhm.
100% rationale. Like there's nothing's emotional, nothing's reactive. It's all you. The most rational decision is probably the best way to say it. And whatever the most rational decision is, or most rational structure or setup, that's what happens no matter what. So that's what you do. So it's not a um what's a I lost the word, anti-war.
Pacifistic.
It's not a pacifistic society, because sometimes rationale will call for swift and military action, but it's like that's kind of the and it's we had to pick up these pieces, and you see how what a hard time we're having explaining what it is. That's kind of how what we had to do to go through to get it. I ended up rereading like the first half of this book because I'm like, am I stupid? Am I just not getting this? Um,
And the purpose of that machine was to try to help identify people who were null A people, because
yeah.
Venus was this utopia of null A people. And
Yes, but also it isn't just you can go to Venus. This is also where you can go here, and then deciding on your level of null A, you will be okay. You're now the president, or you're now this profession, or you're now, so it's kind of nebulous, but essentially it's this computer who is handling these things and doing these things. And it can tell when you're lying at any point, and it could essentially read your thoughts, and it's just this supercomputer who's huge, the size of a skyscraper or bigger,
mhm.
and it's running the world basically. So
Now,
Gilbert Goldstein, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say we should back up a little bit. Gilbert Goldstein wakes up in this apartment, believes that his wife is dead,
Yeah,
believes that this is his life, and it's not.
it's not correct, and he goes to he goes to apply for the games or to enter into it, and they reject him, and they say, I'm sorry, you're not Gilbert Goldstein. You believe you are, but you're not. And so he's like, well, who am I then? And the computer is like, insufficient data or unknown or something to that effect. And so
Yeah.
he gets kicked out. So he's like, then he gets kicked out of his apartment immediately thereafter because you're not Gilbert Goldstein, even though you think you are. He finds out that his wife, or his what he thought was his deceased wife, is actually the president's daughter, Patricia Hardy. And so he's just like, what's going on? But since he's null A, he just accepts it and just, okay, then I got to find out what I am. And you can tell people by null A because of their firm jaw. They know what they're doing, and their stride. You can tell a null A man by his stride. And so then he bumps into, so then now he's homeless on the streets. And there's another girl there that's kicked out of the streets that he bumps into. And they're on the run, sleeping outside on the run from these roving gangs, which were never really shown or seen. And at this point, he gets picked up by, I don't even remember what happens now. There's so many things that happen at this point that it's just non-stop. He's abducted and finds
Multiple
out
times.
that multiple times, multiple times he's abducted. He goes all over the earth. He's, caught by all these sinister characters. At one point, he goes to escape and is shot and is murdered because he was trying
Brutally.
to escape. Brutally
Lots of
murdered.
lots of like flames and lasers and things like
Oh
that.
yeah,
This is about a
he's
third
not.
of the way into the novel.
Yes, and he is dead as a doorknob,
Yeah.
and until he wakes up on Venus. And he's going, what's going on here? And then he's trying to piece all this together. And some of the same people who are there on Earth are on Venus now. And I don't know how far we want to get into as spoilers, but essentially we can kind of summarize at this point. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that this is pretty good. So we're going to bounce back and forth between Venus and Earth. We're trying to figure out, how is this guy alive? He truly did die. What
Yeah.
purpose is there? This is a weird novel in that everything happens to this person. He really doesn't have agency in anything. We get things happening left and right to him as the story progresses. And we start to discover there's a bigger story here of an alien civilization wanting to invade. We, we have, we have sort of backstage violence that's horrific, like thousands, if not millions, or people are dying.
No.
And he's still just trying to figure out who he is and and trying to survive. And if I'm null A, do I have a second brain? What does this second brain do? Can I learn how to use this second
He
brain?
does have a second brain in his nervous system and spinal column. It's tucked in there, yeah, but it's not active.
No.
Yeah.
Until
Which is
I'll give this part away, until he does learn a little bit about how to use it and uses it in ways that help bring some sort of a conclusion to the novel. But the novel is not, almost not so much about how he uses that brain as in finally figuring out a little bit about who he is.
yeah.
There's some big revelations towards the end of the novel.
There's a yeah, one very big revelation at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, which we will not spoil.
No.
But it's your
Although I'm
channel.
not sure
Okay.
if we're going to entice people to read this book.
I don't think we are.
In some of the earlier communications with Jake, I called it the world of null A. No, the world of dull
Oh,
A.
hey.
And you're saying it like a Canadian, right? But it's not
Yeah,
really dull. There's tons of ideas in there, tons of action. A.E. Van Vogt is said to have written maybe like 500 to 800 words at a time. Uh, I'm imagining in your writing sessions, you write a little bit more than that.
that's it.
Yeah,
Like
he would just do
that is
sprints.
really not a lot.
No, that's like maybe 2 to 3 pages. So
Yeah,
I think we can see some of his short chapters and some of his ideas where that's starting to come from. He's going, what do I make happen now in these 750 words? What do I
that
have?
makes a lot of sense.
And so then the story becomes that disjointed story. So if that's true, I think that that helps us understand a little bit about how these are written.
It does because this feels like somebody is start trying to learning how to drive stick. That that jerky movement, and so we're constantly technically going fast, but not really going anywhere. So that actually makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So one of the things I learned is that Philip K. Dick, I was talking to a couple other YouTubers about Philip K. Dick recently, that he really found a lot of inspiration in A.E. Van Vogt's books, and in particular this one. And I think we can see it. I think we can see things that might relate, if you know some of the movies of A.E. Van Vogt, to Total Recall or to
Mhm.
Blade Runner. Some of this crazy world stuff, trying to figure out who you are, what is real, what's not real, and throwing in just a vast variety of ideas. E. Van
Yeah,
Vogt
the
had no shortage of ideas with what he was doing.
that would be in the good section if I was reviewing those on my channel. Was just the sheer amount of well, how about this? What about this? And yeah, just not quite everything but the kitchen sink, but like there was a lot of stuff in here that's like, you could have just slowed down for a minute and expounded upon that and explained that and had much more impact. But yeah, I can see the nobody is going to accuse A.E. Van Vogt of not being imaginative.
That's true. And for him, adventure was always part of it as well. But as I said, I think it's weird because everything happens to go sane. It's not like he has agency in making something happen. It just drove me insane reading this because I'm just wanting him to take charge, do something finally.
Yeah, and that's For those of you who have not read this, we are under exaggerating. We are not nothing. He was being manipulated the entire book. He was not our main character. Our main character was off camera. He was literally a puppet. At one point, he's like, I'm tired of being jerked around. I'm going to go take matters into my own hands. You know what I'm talking about? So he gets a gun. He goes and takes matters in his own hands. And half a page later, he comes back and he's like, yeah, I'm ready to come back to being a puppet. I don't want to be a real boy. It's essentially what happened, which makes sense because that was intentional. It's hard to read and it is frustrating, but like even my back cover, it says he finds himself alternately on Venus and Earth at the will and behest of his manipulator, and how he succeeds and how he discovers the identity of his manipulator makes up the story of this novel. He did it on purpose. It's not a flop. This is what he was going for.
Hmm. I was going to mention with John W. Campbell Jr., who was the editor of Astounding, there's a score of writers that were around and knew A.E. Van Vogt. There's, Isaac Asimov, Robert A. Heinlein, L. Ron Hubbard, and some others. And they really influenced things a lot in the 40s. And then their books would come out in the 1950s based on some of these stories. Uh, what was interesting is I found interesting is that Isaac Asimov and Robert A. Heinlein kind of went their own way, looking at things very scientifically still, but also some character-driven things. But A.E. Van Vogt and L. Ron Hubbard kind of went this mind direction that John W. Campbell was encouraging. And so we see a lot of things like telekinesis, reading minds, etc. And then this null A idea of minds that worked well together without anybody really being in charge, a cooperation. Uh, and unfortunately, A.E. Van Vogt kind of got taken up with L. Ron Hubbard starting
It was
something
rubbered. You're
called
right.
Dianetics, which we now know as the Church of Scientology.
Mm-hmm.
And so he started to lose some years in terms of creativity in the 50s because he was involved there with L. Ron Hubbard.
Which is
Just
kind of surprising because I have like 100 books by A. Van Vogt. So yeah, I have a lot for him to be, it's kind of sidelined and derailed into the Church of Scientology. It was pretty funny. I did find that interesting that this book is all about like achieving the most like null A state of your mind being perfectly rational in every way. And he's like, maybe we came from volcanoes,
oh,
something happened there.
oh. So I don't know if we want to really belabor what we will call the plot here. The
Yeah.
It's a very interesting read in some levels, especially as a historic item. And I can see at the time people were craving that pulp adventure and those pulp ideas, and A.E. Van Vogt certainly had those. But when you
Yes.
want to try to have a coherent plot or some character development, that's not what A.E. Van Vogt was about.
Payoffs or yeah, setups,
Yeah. And
exposition.
he didn't have style or prose really either. It was just a train of thought that he just had coming out of his head every day or two, something more would come out of his head. Now,
Yeah.
we're going to mention Damon Knight here. We've kind of talked about some of his stuff here. He wrote, and I might put some of this on the screen here. He wrote, "The world
Okay.
of Null A abounds in contradictions, misleading clues, and irrelevant action. It is Van Vogt's habit to create a monster or a gadget or an extraterrestrial culture simply by naming it without any explanation of its nature. By this means and by means of his writing style, which is discursive and hard to follow, Van Vogt also obscures his plot to such an extent that when it falls to pieces at the end, the event passes without remark." I don't know if you want to
Yeah,
make
he's
any
right.
comments on that.
Yeah, I I tend to agree with all of that, I
Yeah.
think. I mean there was reference to at one point we are pulled into the alien culture and then we know they're hunting on some kind of alien safari. We're given nothing.
No.
No, I thought we were at Venus at first. I was like,
Do
oh no,
you
we're not at Venus now.
do you even
We
know
don't know what
anything
the
about
aliens.
this? Do you know anything about this alien culture?
No, we weren't even getting what type of aliens they were, what species.
No.
Just like, hey, his name's Eros, and Eros is in an argument with somebody that's hunting because I don't know. We aren't given an explanation of what they look like.
No.
They're just, and he even refers to them as I said, I walked next. He walked next to the man. It's like, wait, are these humans
I mean,
from?
I think there's human agents of these aliens for I'm not sure why these humans were agents for them, but those were the people he was dealing with.
I don't have a clue.
No.
No idea. That's why I found myself rereading this. Why? Because I was at one point I was reading this along with reading something else. I don't typically like to do that, but I was like, I had to for time constraints. And I ended up having to say nope. And that's kind of why we were recording this at one point. I pushed it back because I was like, give me a few more hours because I'm going to reread some stuff here because I feel stupid. And I don't think it's me in this case
No,
because
I
there's
don't
a
think
lot
so.
that's just not explained. That's just things are happening, and you're like, okay, now we're here now, and like even battles happen, wars happen, and we're just kind of like in passing, like, oh yeah, Armageddon, we just passed Armageddon back there, things like that. And you're like, whoa, wait a minute, what's happening?
The only other thing I think I'll mention from Damon Knight's criticism here, he talks about characterization, background. He talks about style. Examples of bad writing in the world of Null A could be multiplied endlessly. It is my personal opinion that the whole of it was written badly with only minor exceptions. He
Now
let him
that's
have it.
harsh.
Very harsh.
Damon Knight does not hold back. He's blasted some stuff that I've read and been like, okay, it wasn't that bad. And I like my favorite part is doing the bad sections of books and highlighting books. And even sometimes I'm like, Damon, just lighten up a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not. I wouldn't say it's written as a whole written badly with only a few minor exceptions. I wouldn't say that. I would say it's probably written carelessly.
I think it's the market. And what I mean by that is the pulp magazines. These writers were just trying to get these stories into magazines each month to get a paycheck to put some food on the table and take care of their family. And so
Yeah.
they had to churn out such an amazing amount of work to sell to multiple magazines. Is it a surprise that he churns out something for 1 month and then he's got to churn out something for another month and another month and it doesn't really hang well together as a book? I don't think that's a surprise.
Yeah, I think what also it could be is there were some authors that could do that and do it great. And those are what we're comparing them against. You know what I
True.
mean? Authors that could. I mean, Paul Anderson is one of the most prolific authors. And while he has some duds, yeah, if you write 1,000 books, you're going to have a couple duds, and even his duds are still written pretty well. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And so I think when you compare it to that, but yeah, like shoot, if I had to write a book a month, a short story a month, you know what I mean? I'm telling you right now, they're not all going to be bangers.
Yep.
And so that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense, I guess.
So on your rating scale, I'm putting you on the spot here. Where do you think you would put the world of Null A?
I would say the World of Null A. It's not a return to pulp. It's not 1 out of 5. I wouldn't even say it's 2 out of 5. I'd probably say it's an ebook. It's only because up until halfway, most of the way through this book, I'm just like, I mean, people here are saying like it's hailed. What does it say here? Science fiction fans will hail it as a classic, and some people do. A
Hmm.
lot of people do, and I'm like, are you guys reading what I'm reading? That's why I kept rereading it. Like maybe the problem is me. And then at the very end, with the twist reveal, I was like, oh, I get it, because that actually elevated it a whole rank. The end, the twist at the end, at least for me. And I was like, okay, I see what he was going for. I see what he was trying to do. Now, did he do it well? I don't think so. Uh, did the pay, did the pay, but it's like maybe there was such a sense of satisfaction because we finally did get a payoff for we've been for a build up. Like, sorry, my blinds are lights coming in. I got to stop filming in the afternoon. But yeah, and so I think I would give it a 3 out of 5, maybe 2.5, 2.5 out of 5. I'm not going to seek out the sequels. I don't think I'm going to read them. I might read the revised edition at some point just to compare and see if Damon Knight is actually like if some of the issues we're talking about were actually fixed, or if Damon Knight is, like you said, just kind of like much better now or whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I'm very curious to hear what you would think then, as if you take a look at it.
yeah,
I actually
but
agree
the
with you.
the ending was great. I think the twist.
And that twist ending was only in the last 2 to 3 paragraphs, perhaps, that we discover something that's very important to the entire story that helps explain why all these things are happening to him.
Yeah,
That there's something going on behind the scenes that we don't understand until those last 2 or 3 paragraphs. And I agree, it does help.
mhm.
I probably wouldn't have given it I do it out of 10 usually. I'm thinking it's a 5 or 6 as well. So
Okay.
we're
Yeah,
looking at the same area here. I would have perhaps gone down to a 4 if that ending didn't happen the way it did.
yeah.
I know a
I
lot of
think too.
people,
Oh, go ahead.
I know a lot of people found A.E. Van Vogt's work to be very inspirational to their own work. It seems there's a lot of writers out there who really he charged their ideas, he charged their concepts about what is real. He was a great stimulant to their imagination.
Yeah.
And hey, we're coming back to that blunt that you were talking about. That
That's it. That's the stimulant. A.E.
yeah,
Van Vogt is the giant blunt
of science fiction.
and demonetized. Sorry about that, Richard.
Oh boy.
Ah,
I don't
you're
know
not
how I'm
getting
going to
ad
deal with
revenue.
this
You're
one.
not getting ad revenue on this video.
Okay. You'll have to stay tuned to see if this is edited in or out.
Oh, dang it.
This is why I record ahead of time.
That's smart. Yeah. Live is risky.
It is.
Now we're like half hour 40. We're long enough in here.
Oh
Nobody on
yeah.
YouTube's watching,
There you
or
go.
the YouTube overlords aren't watching this. I do think that the people that love this book, it kind of reminded me of the only Jack Vance I've ever read was The Blue Planet or Blue World. And it reminded me of that in a sense that people love that, but I didn't. And I think people love the idea of it more than what it actually was. They loved the concept. And so people that read it years ago, read it when they were kids, they remember the idea like we're talking about. And the idea is great. And the twist is great. The way it's one of those twists that recontextualizes everything. Those are the good type of twists. And so that's what I think people remember about it. And that's why people say, yeah, I'll hail it as a classic because, like you said, it sparks ideas. It like stimulates imagination and like, oh, it kind of broadens your eyes and stuff. Kind of like the very similar to Jack Vance's The Blue World. And I think that's why that's remembered fondly as well, because the concept was so great, but what we're remembering may be what we want it to be and not necessarily what it really is.
That's bringing in nostalgia. It's like the things that we see when we're teenagers or young adults read or watch. There's a nostalgia for that, and there's rose-colored glasses in terms of the way you're
Mm-hmm.
watching and thinking about these things. Now with the internet, we can see some of those old TV shows, or if we pick up one of those old books and we go,
Yeah.
it's not quite the way I remember it now that I'm more adult or I've had more experience with different books and
Yeah.
TV shows. I have a feeling that that's a bit of the case here too with A.E. Van Vogt. But I will still give him the context of the time as well. The type of writing that was done in that time, the type of writing that sold, what the market and the publishers were looking for.
Yeah, I agree. When did you say this was originally serialized in the pulps?
1945. He'd written it a bit earlier.
Okay.
I think I saw somewhere that he wrote it in 1942.
Yeah, yeah, we're still kind of at the tail end of the golden age of the pulp age there. So I see what you're saying. I can give him some leeway, I think.
Yeah.
Not a whole lot, but a little bit.
From the amount that I've read of A.E. Van Vogt, what I would say is I really appreciate his short stories way more than
Mm,
his trying to create a novel out of short stories.
yeah,
And so I would encourage people to read his short stories versus his novels. That's my
yeah.
impression right now.
I'll definitely give him another try.
Hmm.
I Not just because I have 150 books from A.E. Van.
Do you have Voyage of the
He was
Space
very
Beagle?
prolific. I do have Voyage of the Space Beagle. I almost read it for SF Horror Month because I know one of the stories there was kind of, some people think it's inspiration for Alien
Yeah.
in that kind
Yep.
of short story collection. And so I was going to read that for SF Horror Month, but I
And
goes,
I believe that's his very first story, his very first sale, which is pretty
oh, no
amazing.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I made a fool of myself by making fun of the title, not realizing that it was kind of a satire of Darwin's Voyage of the Beagle.
That's
So
exactly
yeah, I
what it
made
is.
it so
Except
everyone
it's
in the
in
comment section is
space.
like, "You idiot!" Except in space, yeah, right.
Yep. That's
I was
why
like,
it's like
"Voyage of
Star
the
Trek.
Beagle."
It's not a
Yeah,
trek across the desert, it's a Star Trek.
yeah. So I made a fool of myself, not for the first time, not for the last. Would you recommend it?
I would recommend it to the person who's really interested in the history of science fiction and that it does have a place within that history. If you're looking just for an entertaining read, no.
Yeah, I agree, 100% agree.
Yeah.
Is this a ton of fun? Not really. The twist is good, but yeah, the having all the historical context makes it worth it at that
Yeah.
point.
Well,
Yeah.
what I like to do is to see if somebody remembers how I sign off. So if I say until next time, what would you say?
Until next time, keep reading.
Oh, man,
See,
that was
I even
professional.
got the head move too.
I loved it. That was great.